welcome all of you here in Orlando, Florida to the 2022 Fun Convention Educational Series. And as usual, we have over a dozen speakers who are really outstanding numismatists who are willing to share their knowledge with their fellow collectors, which I think is one of the highest callings of numismatics itself. Today's leadoff speaker for the 2022 series here at the Fun Convention is none other than Mr. Mark Trout. About a year ago, Mark graced us with an absolutely stunning presentation on Lincoln cents, an in-depth analysis from 1909 to 1949. And it was extraordinarily well received, and Mark graciously agreed to do a presentation this year on the Lincoln cent, the next generation from 1950 to 2000. And there's some wonderful, interesting, fascinating, unbelievable knowledge you folks are going to pick up and take home with you when Mr. Trout gives his presentation. It's some really, just absolutely stunning information. You're going to be thrilled to death. On behalf of Fun, I want to present a man who not only serves his flock at a local church, he works at the local coin club level, and he's a Fun board member who volunteers his services for our state organization too. He is a true numismatist and a true gentleman. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Mark Trout.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. Glad to be with you today and to have the privilege of sharing once again one of the most wonderful stories of coinage that we've ever known. The Lincoln cent was the first U.S. coin made for general circulation that had an actual person depicted on the coin. It was minted beginning in 1909, which commemorates the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, and that made it that much more special when he was honored in that way. 1/3 of the coins minted in the United States from the 20th century are tied to the Lincoln cent. 1/3 of all U.S. coins were Lincoln cents in the 20th century. Think about that. It's been that many of them produced. What you see is the fact that there was originally the wheat ears on the reverse, but the memorial came along, and that's what we'll cover today as a part of the second generation. Among our current coinage, the Lincoln cent is the lowest denomination minted, having been minted since August the 2nd, 1909. Anyone here born in 1909? Just had to ask, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut anyone out that had been a long-time collector. Most people who collect coins began with the lowly cent. The single coins available to nearly every collector, nearly every budget, whether you're a novice or an expert. So that's why it's so important. In fact, when it came out, the Numismatists carried a particular piece by McLandberg Wilson, and on the March date of 1909, he produced this piece of poetry about the Lincoln cent. Not on the eagle golden will we behold his face, nor yet on gleaming silver the honored feature trace, but to the common copper, the lowly cent instead, has fallen the distinction of bearing Lincoln's head. The millionaire may seldom those noble outlines grasp, but childhood's chubby fingers the image it will cast. It will clasp, I apologize. The poor man will esteem it, and mothers hold it dear. The plain and common people he loved when he was here. Yes, that's what makes it so significant a coin. It was a common coin, loved by common people, and used all the time. There's a rule for collecting Lincoln cents. There's a rule for collecting about anything in coin collecting, but my favorite phrase is collect what you like. Now there's a reason to say why you should do that, because there is no book, no chart, no publishing company that has the right to dictate to you what you collect. Your collection reflects you, your interests, your taste, your choices. You decide what goes in your Lincoln Cent collection. Don't let anybody else tell you what you have to collect. After all, there are a lot of suggestions and alternatives and possibilities, but there are things that make collecting Lincoln Cents lots of enjoyment. For example, you can collect Lincoln Cents by date. You'll need 113 of them to collect one from every date. You'll need 279 of them to collect every date and mint, and that's without the varieties. In fact, merely by collecting type coins, a single specimen of each type of Lincoln Cent that's been produced, you'll only need to collect 12 of them. Now that's interesting. Of course, there's also the proof issues. The matte proofs from 09 to 16, the pre-war from 36 to 42, the moderns from 1950 to 1964, and the S proofs from 1968 to 2019. And then we can get into the W proofs and all the others that have come most recently. Now, just to make sure you understand, there are also certain things that come along about being a variety collector. And varieties include double dies and RPMs and large dates and small dates and wide AMs and narrow AMs, and, well, those are varieties. And then there's errors. Errors are coins that should have never left the mint. They are coins that had something wrong in their manufacture. A true error coin can be on the wrong planchet. It can be brockages or surface strikes, broad strikes. It just doesn't work. We snicker when we see one like this. Here we have a very pretty copper nickel. How about a 1985 P. Jefferson nickel struck on a copper planchet? Or maybe you want to see it the other way around. Here's a Jefferson nickel on a 1-cent planchet. And I love the thought that we can collect even dimes. Well, excuse me, a Lincoln Cent on a dime planchet. And then when you really get down to it, then you find the counter brockages that are the true errors that are looking pretty rough. And I'm going to leave all these right here for you to look. There is one other thing that you need to remember. Sometimes a coin never gets printed at all. This one is a blank planchet. Should never have left the mint, but it did. And just think, a 1982 or maybe a 2007 piece. The problem is that we don't know the date because it wasn't finished. There's no copper. There's no date. The planchet never got struck. Well, now you get the idea of what all you can collect if you'd like to collect errors and varieties, as well as proof issues, type, circulating, date and mint, or just one a year. My goal in sharing with you this day is to help you discover some of the more interesting Lincoln Cents of 1950 to 2000. I can't cover all the dates, mints, errors, and varieties. I couldn't cover only the ones that you might want. Maybe you're a Philadelphia collector and you want to collect only the cents from Philadelphia, or the D's from Denver, or the S from San Francisco. Or maybe you just want raw coins, coins that you can handle, while other collectors like encapsulated coins, slabbed coinage, and some want wonder coins. Wonder coins, you wonder where this one was. The super ones with pluses and stars or green stickers, the really special ones. As one guy once showed me a coin that he'd purchased from the internet. He was so pleased with it. He found it. He thought it was the greatest Lincoln Cent that could possibly be found. It was a 1982 MS 73. Something wrong with that? I think you can understand. All I could think of was that I turned over the slab and kept looking to see where it said made in China. Well, nonetheless, you get the picture. The joy is to collect desirable Lincoln Cents. Not all cents are equal. in strike, luster, toning, eye appeal. No, they're not all equal. Not all cent dates are equal in quantity. Some years, some mints more, others less. Not all are equal in quality. Not all cents graded the same number, even by the same grading service, are equal in quality. I'm not picking on the graders, I'm picking on the fact that the coins, their surface texture, their rims, their borders, their method of preparation, the condition of the dies, the condition of the hubs, all that determines the condition and desirability of a particular Lincoln cent. And therefore, they're not all created equal, despite how much President Lincoln used that phrase. It's just a reminder that understanding the progressive deterioration of the master hub, the dies, and the strikes makes for definitely a choice of a certain cent chosen for a typeset or a year set. That's why it's important. Not every cent is so perfect. Now, we know that certain things began to change. Here we have pictures of the three mint facilities, Philadelphia on the top left, San Francisco, and of course, on the bottom, and Denver on the top right. Moving into the post-war era of production with these three mints created an interesting change of pace. By the end of 1850, 1,272 individuals were on the mint's payroll. Why is that a change? Because 5 years earlier, in 1945, the mint had employed 3,736 employees. The machinery had improved. The process of coin making got better. And of course, the distribution of coinage was spread out so much more evenly than it had been in the war years. It had improved so drastically, so all three mints continued production, and the new mint's venture was to return to something new that had been familiar. In 1950, they began producing proof sets again. What a great thing to have a proof set. The modern era of proof coinage launched in June of 1950. The problem was that the coins were released in July of 1950, and there was neither a newscast or any opportunity for early ordering. The mintage was limited to just 51,386 sets, but at least proof coins returned after World War II. It took until 1950. When you see those that look interesting of those mint photos, I can't identify all the automobiles in the one from Denver, but those are 1950 photographs. It was great. I could have gotten sidetracked on that one, but I decided to behave myself. Common to the production of the Lincoln cents in 51 and 2 and 3, the Philadelphia and Denver mints were capable of handling more materials in production. Philadelphia had the best machinery. Denver had great machinery, but the cramped mint at San Francisco couldn't process larger ingots of copper. As a result, the S mints were producing fewer and fewer cents each year. Besides fewer cents, their quality control seemed to take a permanent vacation. The production was poor. There were lots of repunched mint marks, and in that mint, through the 4 years of 1951, 2, 3, and 4, their quality decreased greatly. Believe it or not, the third coin over there, that 54S, was considered to be one of the finest San Francisco minted coins. If that was my choice to keep in a beautiful set, I'd have to think a long time about whether or not that was quality enough to match the others. It just simply didn't happen in San Francisco. It got a little worse. The king of varieties came in 1955 with the S. Lincoln cent out of San Francisco. Late in the summer of '55, a working die was improperly aligned with the hub, And in between impressions, the distinct shifting of the die rotated slightly around a center point. And with this unique shift came the imprinting of a 55 double die obverse. It was one of the most popular varieties ever minted, but it also spelled the end of San Francisco producing S coins for circulation between 1955 and 1967. That's why you can't get a 1956 S Lincoln cent. They suspended the production of them in San Francisco following this miraculous variety that was considered so wonderful. When we think about the production of the cent and the number of pieces minted, in 1956, the Denver Mint issued more cents than ever. In fact, 1 billion cents, 1 billion, were issued for the first time since 1945. Can you imagine that? 1 billion coins. Since 1945, the Denver Mint produced 1 billion for the very first time. The large state of the dies means that if you're going to try to find a nice MS-65 red Denver cent, good luck, you'll be searching a lot. The qualities did not improve in either Philadelphia or Denver in 56, 57, or 58. What made a difference? Well, in 1992, a grand memorial was planned in Washington, D.C. in honor of President Abraham Lincoln. This beautiful memorial, created in the Greek Revival style of architecture, was done by Henry Bacon. The sculpture on the inside, the one of Lincoln seated, created by David Chester, French, was housed within the structure. This completed memorial to the 16th president was chosen to grace the Lincoln cent on the sesquicentennial of his birth in 1959. Sesquicentennial, 150 years. Frank Gasparo managed the new reverse for the 59 cent, retiring the familiar wheat ears reverse that had graced the coin since its inception in 1909. That's why we can picture that beautiful Lincoln Memorial, an actual photograph of one in the sunshine, but how well it transferred to the 1959 cent. Now that's something else. By the way, I'm not sure of the shoe size, but I understand where his right toe exceeds the pedestal there. That's 14 and 1/8 inches. So he has really big feet. That's at least in the statue. The joy of knowing that there were a variety of changes to the Lincoln cent help us understand that the Lincoln cent didn't change size. It was 19.05 millimeters in diameter and 1.58 millimeters in thickness. Now, I mentioned that just to say that things didn't change about the Lincoln cent, and yet, within these years, the changes came from copper and zinc and tin to steel and zinc with the plating in 1943, the silver one, the one for the war years, and then the copper and zinc that people call the shell case cents from 44 and 46, and then from 47 to 62, the copper with zinc and tin once again in there. The weight of those barely changed. In fact, it didn't really change until after 1962 to 82 with the copper and 5% zinc. Our current coinage, 1982 till now, did get lighter. So when you think about what a roll of pennies felt like in 1960, and you see what a roll of pennies weighs in 1985, you'll know that it's noticeably lighter. That's because in grams they weigh less, in grains they weigh less, and their specific gravity is less. Now, if that's enough technical stuff for all you Lincoln cent lovers, that's what I wanted to tell you. Yes, what they were made from in those years has changed, but nonetheless, they were all the same size, They were all the same thickness, and until we went to the current set with zinc-plated copper, they were all the same weight. The Lincoln Memorials, the following year, there was a change in the coin. They decided that 2 new distinct master dies should be resolved. They needed to do something because they thought that 1960 coin, the one that had the, let me press the right button, hello, small o, that was perhaps going to be too fragile a 0 to put on the coin. So they thought that they should make it a little heftier, and you can see that the large date 0 was wider, as someone described it and said, from a donut to a life ring. Yeah, I understand that. But what's more amazing is not only did they change the 0, they made the tail of the 9 longer and the stem of the 6 longer, and thus there's a small date and a large date in 1960 at Philadelphia and at Denver, and it was considered so important to do this, they did it thinking the public would never notice. Any of you that are Lincoln cent collectors, I think you look first at 1960 to know if you have a large date or a small date. I think you notice that immediately. And that's one of the problems that marked 1960. By the way, that didn't occur again until 1982. They decided they weren't going to do that kind of thing again. But why did they ever do it in the first place? What was wrong that they needed to produce so many cents? They needed to produce so many because of something called state sales tax rates. You see, if you spend $1 for something, it's one thing to have to spend $1, but you would spend $1, and in Florida you'd spend a nickel, and you would spend a cent. It would be $1.06 to make your purchase. In California, you would need $1, you would need 8 cents. No, actually 9, because it was 8.25% tax rate. Yes, it's the sales taxes that keep the cents in circulation. We have been successful at keeping all these minor coins going because of sales tax rates in the various states. And no, we haven't made them equal. And no, gasoline sales tax rates are not equal. And no, it seems that every state has to do it their own way. And that includes Oregon and Montana that don't charge sales tax. Oh yeah, what a challenge it is for the other states to say they charge taxes. And then you take a good look at that and say that New Hampshire doesn't do it either. Well, times are changing, and that's why there was the beginning of a coin shortage. And with that coin shortage in 1961, the amazing thing is that the mint director, Ava Adams, blamed coin collectors for the coin shortage. It was all our fault that we were running out of coinage to make change. Now, while she blamed us for that, part of it was the vending machine industry. You see, in 1962 and 3 and 4, they needed 2 cents to put inside the pack of every package of cigarettes sold in a vending machine, so that when you dropped a quarter in the vending machine, you could get your package of smokes and you would have your change already inside the package. That's one way to keep the sales tax working and all. However, it was that point that reminded us that it's the sales tax that affected it, not necessarily coin collectors. The mint increased production to 3 shifts. That didn't fix the job either. And so they decided they had to fix the coin shortage. The coin shortage brought out the special mint set solution. And in 1965, we made lots and lots and lots of Lincoln cents. We didn't put an S on them. We didn't put a D on them. We didn't put a P on them. We just put out all those coins. In fact, we did it for a year and a half, making coins with the date of 1965. And then we put them out in 1966 with no dates on them, and again in 1967 with no dates on them. Now, if you were a serious coin collector, you always wanted your mint sets, but they didn't do them the same way. They did them as special mint sets, and they put out the coins, but they only had one little package with the coins in it because they only had a cent, a nickel, a dime, a quarter, a $50. And they didn't have to have a set for P and a set for D. They just didn't need them anymore. And that's why the special mint sets became, well, so obvious. But the other thing that happened was the dies were used so hard that it's really a special thing to find a bright red 66 or 67 Lincoln cent that qualifies as an MS 66 or 67. Because the dies took a beating. Well, that cost-cutting measure didn't exactly solve the whole problem, but I will say it made a difference in how coin collectors responded to the government. What did come up and make a difference is when the federal government saw that things were looking so bad, they made some changes. On the left is a 1968 Lincoln cent. The master hub that made the dies had been in use since 1916. Yes, that's not a typographical error. 1916. Over the period of decades that master hub was used, Lincoln's head got a little bigger. Lincoln's tie sort of disappeared around his neck. His beard lost any definition, and his hairlines became nearly flat. To add to it, the words "In God We Trust" got pushed all the way to the rim, and in most cases are touching the rim, and there's no space at all left between them. And the liberty often became a liability. And we had trouble with reading the word liberty. We weren't real sure if it was L-I-E or L-I-B because of the where. When the new master hub made its debut in 1969, the one on the right, you can tell there's a difference in the hair. You can see that the letters "In God We Trust" are spaced a little lower. And in the middle of that field, you can identify that Lincoln looks like he was on a lower calorie diet. He's a little thinner, and his head isn't so fat, and his shoulders aren't so rounded. But more importantly, you can read the date, and that is the difference in 1969 when the new hub made new dies. That was a big deal. And finally, when that happened in '68, we put mint marks on the coins again, D's and S's. You would think that the mint finally got used to it. But oops, they did it again. The problem of 1960, they repeated in 1970 with a small date, high 7, and a low date, large date, low 7. And the difference is a little tougher this time than the 60 large date, small date, but it's still there because everything changed. The ends of the 9 are blunt on the large date. The ends of the 9 are chiseled on the small date. You can see that there's a slight difference, and the biggest problem is until you compare them, you really couldn't tell looking at either coin, the one on the left or the one on the right, that there were differences until you laid them beside the opposite one. Oh, how we can make mistakes. The Mint should have waited to correct that 70 until the next year in 71. But no, they were too busy. So they brought out not only 2 distinct cents, but managed to produce something more. A 71D and a 71S that were all double dies. Oh, what a wonderful thing to look through. The problem is that they've become more speculative, especially as the years went on. A 72S is worth something, but the other ones, not so much. We've found that it's been something weird to see these things happen. the 72S double die was a sensation. It was saved in uncirculated condition, and thus the 72S commands a higher price because so many of them were being saved. They changed the obverse die. And in 1973, they finally changed the reverse. Look at the new hub. Why, it's all there. It's such a surprise. It's so wonderful. They made Frank Gasparo's initials larger on the reverse of the coin. Wow. Remember when they argued about initials before? Well, it may not be in your memory, but 1909 they got mad at Victor D. Brenner for putting his initials on a Lincoln cent. In 1973, they made Frank Gasparo's initials larger. And then they went back to the other size because politics has strange bedfellows, and who knows what the decisions are politically in Washington and in the U.S. Mint. They loved making slight changes, but they always said that they were looking to improve the Lincoln cent. All right, let's see how well they improved it, because the next change didn't occur until 1979, and at the San Francisco Mint, where the dies had been used and used and used, the S Mint, the S die wasn't doing anything good for the S Mint coins. It was worn, it looked like a bubble, it was a bump on the coin. And so, production through 10 months used a mushy filled S, mint mark, and that was on the coins, but especially it showed up on that beautiful proof coin. The die was used for so long, and then they got a new die. And the new S die that was shipped to them, they punched that in, and look at what happened. It was so clear. The 79 Type 2 S became a clear S, and it was used for the remainder of the year, and you could see serifs on the letter, and thus the proof coins of 1979 S have been labeled Type 1 and Type 2. And the later ones, they get a little more expensive, don't they? That's because they changed the die. Now, after 34 billion cents were made for circulation in 1979, 80, and 81, you would think the Mint would learn their lesson. But once again, in 1981, they saw that what had been a clear S wasn't as clear as it ought to be. And so, late in the year, somewhere around the end of November or early December, they used a different die. They punched a different S on the die, and thus there was a nice new clear S, 1981 S, Type 2. And once again, there was a Type 1 and Type 2 proof. Can you imagine the Mint's excitement at being able to say, oh, we've got both? Well, let me tell you what happened. When they shipped all the coins back to Philadelphia and assembled proof sets, you can find proof sets that were put together very late in the year that have both Type 1 and Type 2 coins in them. Just because you find a Type 2 half in your set does not mean that all the coins in the set are Type 2. In fact, if you find an Anthony dollar that's a Type 2, it doesn't mean that the quarter, dime, nickel, and cent are all Type 2. Oh, what a wonderful thing it is to have a mixture of those, so your coin set doesn't cost what it says for Type 1 or what it says it's Type 2, because the coins could be individually either in your set. Oh, congratulations to all of you who have 1981 Type 2 sets that are still in the boxes and you've never looked. You could be sitting on a very handsome profit. Just be prepared. If we hadn't made those changes, then we would have much more been ready to accept 1982's 7 different Lincoln cents minted in 1982. I know, they had to save money at the Mint now. So they decided to pull the copper from the planchets and use zinc planchets that would be copper coated instead. The 7 cents include a Philadelphia copper large and small date, a Denver copper only in a large date. Anyone that's got a small date Denver copper has a fake. They weren't made. Now, if you have one that's zinc, you can have a Philadelphia large and small date that is a zinc cent with copper coating. I was going to bring my handy dandy gadget for being able to separate 1982 coins, but I didn't think it'd make the trip. It's not anything perfect. It's a popsicle stick with a little dowel in the middle, and on one end sits a copper cent, and you put a cent on the other end, and if it doesn't tip, it's zinc. You know how right away which cent you've got. The point is that you couldn't tell at first by identification, but these 7 varieties of Lincoln cents soon started telling the stories as to which planchets they were from. The zinc planchets had a lot of problems. Some of them had little bubbles in the copper. The end result of the little bubbles, the bubbles would break and you would start getting black spots on your Lincoln cent. The next ones would put on streaks because it wasn't poured on evenly enough. And this change in planchet composition, authorized by the Treasury of the Secretary in 1974 to change it, it was authorized in 74 but never changed until 82. Does that tell you something about politics in Washington? This change brought about a new level of ugliness to the Lincoln cent. Streaks, bubbles, copper plating, the immediately wear and discoloration of those cents. Wow. It was less satisfying than anticipated, but it was a cost saver, and that's what the government was all about, saving money. Collectors weren't real impressed and still aren't, as they look to say, why are some of my encapsulated 1982 Lincoln cents turning colors inside my encapsulation holders? Why wouldn't they? They were made to not be kept forever. I think that we have always looked at the great mysteries of collecting Lincoln cents, but one of the most amazing omissions is what happened in 1990. With all the preparation of the proof coins, especially the dies used in their manufacture, we could hardly anticipate that the mint would overlook such an issue as installing the correct mint mark. But in 1990, a working die from Philadelphia was shipped off to California to the San Francisco Mint. It went into the normal treatment at the San Francisco Mint, and it was sandblasted, it was polished, it was chromium plated, and it was inserted in use in the machine. In 1990, the Lincoln cent proof came out and the S mark, mint mark, was missing. Now, the reason that's so amazing is that I didn't list the 20 names of the people who worked on the project, but there were 20 people involved in the shipping and receiving and the implementation of all the steps before the thing was put in the machine, including those who ran the mint machines to make the coins, and no one noticed that it was missing. Oh, it had happened in 1971 to the nickel, and it happened to the dime in 1968, 1970, and 1983 to have missing mint marks, but it hadn't happened to the cent before. And it was estimated at the time that though the production run was 3,555, it seems that they were being pulled back in at the mint, and it is estimated that there's 150 1990 no mint mark cents. I'm not real sure that any of those statistics are accurate. If they couldn't get the fact that there needed to be an S on the cent, who says that there were only 150 of them released? And more importantly, who said that the mint employees didn't snatch them up to hang on to them because they were an error made at the mint? If no other reason than job security. We don't know, but we know one thing. The prices before this was discovered were minuscule, and now the prices for a 1990 No S Lincoln cent exceeds $2,000. Wow. Well, the expectation of finding one is rare, but then again, it's possible that people bought a proof set of 1990 and never opened it. You never know what you can find. You may find an unopened 90 proof set that's missing the S mint mark on that Lincoln cent. Oh, I'm having fun with these. The newest thing that came later in the decade is all of this wonderful stuff of the wide and close AMs. That's not about the morning of the printing. It's in the America. All the normal cents. Well, from 1959 to 1992, all business strikes and proofs are supposed to have the wide AM. There is supposed to be space down here between the A and the M. You should be able to see the field. The problem is that sometimes the dies were a close by A and M tied together. But in 1993, all business strikes and proofs have a close AM. And in 1994 to 2008, all business strikes have a close AM. And 1994 to 2008, all proofs have a wide AM. There. Now that should help you remember so you can look them up and see. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be silly, but if you want to know if you've got valuable ones, you have to understand that the 92 business strike close AM has some value to it. It's the variety. The 92D business strike with the close AM has some value to it. The 98S proof close AM has a little more value to it, as does the 99S proof close AM. Now, the business strike of 1999 with wide AM is sought after because it's much more valuable. And in 1998, the business strike with a wide AM is even more valuable. And the 2000p business strike with a wide AM, that's almost becoming a four-figure coin. How do you know whether you've got a wide AM or a narrow AM if you haven't seen this up close? Take a look at the F and G by the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, because the F and G changes places whether you have a narrow or a wide AM. If it's a close AM, you'll see it in one spot. If it's a wide AM, you'll see it with more space away from the base of the Lincoln Memorial. This is so fascinating to go through all these things, but we always look for help. So I would like to recommend to you that I found a great deal of help in my collecting through The Complete Guide to Lincoln Cents by David W. Lang. I really appreciate his writing, his photographs, all the things that are in the book. It might be worth it. But the other part that I liked that David Lang produced was an article in the Numismatist, and he talked about assembling the ideal 20th century typeset. And he wrote the article back in January of 1998, and it was published, different coins sent through dollar, all through that time period of what would be a perfect 20th century typeset. I like that because that allowed me to understand that I could get something as common as a 1919 Philadelphia cent that would be the best looking with new hub, die, and beautiful production as being an exquisite example of the original Lincoln cent without the S or without the initials. It was wonderful. And then I can skip and go to 43 and get one of those beautiful World War II coins. And then I can get a shell-cased cent from 2 years later. And eventually I have some of the most beautiful coins, some of the best strikes ever produced by the U.S. Mint without having to collect every date, every mint mark, and go through zillions of coins trying to find which one's absolutely the best. Now those of you who love the proof sets, just a reminder that you can collect proof coins and also enjoy and have a most worthwhile collecting habit. And the Lincoln series does contain a variety. It sure does. 1909 to 1916, 1936 to 1942, 1950 to 1964. You don't have to collect all of them. You can collect one from each of those categories, or you could collect just one section of them. Any way you do it, you're going to have fun thinking that I've got some really neat proof coins. Yes, you do. And if you want to get the mirror finished proof Lincolns from 1968 to date, that's wonderful. Or get the reverse proofs and stare at those for a while. They're beautiful. They're such a challenge to enjoy. Oh, you variety collectors, there's hundreds of varieties. Double mint marks, double dies. Oh yes, just keep going through them. RPMs, planchet composition changes, even the distinction of die pairs, if you want to get that technical. These are all specialties of variety collecting. If we brought in someone from the Cherry Picker's Guide, we could go for hours talking about this, or a specialist from Kaneka. I mean, just learning all the distinguishing errors from varieties is a big deal. To know the die cracks, to know the cuds, the laminations, the wrong planchets, the brockage, the OMMs. Yes, those are all different types that you can learn and collect when you're collecting Lincoln cents. You can accumulate and have a great time, and some people collect rolls of Lincoln cents. That's right, rolls. Roll collecting is still popular and was at one time one of the most popular ways to collect Lincoln cents. Many collectors are looking for new discoveries all the time. Well, the third generation of Lincoln cents begins with the new millennium in 2001. And if permitted, I'd be glad to continue with 2001 to current date at another fun show. But for right now, I just want to ask, any of you good Sherlockian people, you really like to do research? Here's one for you. The great Lincoln cent mystery that comes out of 1959. In 1959, we made a change. Remember what the change was on the reverse of the Lincoln cent in 1959? We put the memorial on it. But on this 1959D Lincoln cent, there is a wheat ear reverse. Oh my. Where did that come from? History tells us that it's unsolved. People look and say, that can't be a real coin, it's a counterfeit. Then why did it get certified once? And then why was the certification taken back? And why hasn't it hit the market? And if it is counterfeit, why weren't there hundreds or thousands of them to hit the market? I've never known a counterfeiter to make one coin and stop. When they make a coin that's counterfeit, they make them by the shipment load to unload them on unwary collectors. Well, you get to decide. It's a very explicit counterfeit or it's absolutely genuine. But what you discover is because you like Lincoln cents. And I'll let you know that I had a great time using these sources, the official Red Book of Lincoln cents by David Bowers, United States Copper Coins, the Complete Guide to Lincoln Cents, Lincoln Cent Encyclopedia, the authoritative reference on Lincoln cents and counterfeit detection, and these websites that include the Lincoln Cent Forums, the Lincoln Cent Resource, Copper Coins, Lincoln Cents, and it's so much to find out all these good things about Lincoln cents. I'm going to leave these up if you want to examine them and see them better closely, because the white faded on the yellow a lot more than I expected. Nonetheless, I hope you like to collect Lincoln cents. And Mr. Lincoln, do you have a collection of your own coin?
I do have some.
Good.
Yes.
Which one's your favorite out of that collection?
Everyone.
everyone. Good decision. Thank you for not turning off the variety and the error collectors and all those that like all the other stuff. I want to say thank you. And I really appreciate that you're here today. And I just thought I'd have a surprise. Was there anyone present born in 1909? Oh no, that would be too long ago. How about 1959? Do we have a 1959? Person born in 1959? Oh boy, you guys are making this tough. How about somebody born in 1951? Ah, there we go. I have an MS-64 red 1955 1 cent. No, it's not doubled. I wanted to make sure you knew that you came to a Lincoln cent. Any proof collectors among us? Now that you know that I'm standing here holding a proof coin, any proof collectors among us? Somebody might like a 1962 proof Lincoln cent. Would you like one? Sure, come collect a 62 Lincoln proof. And when they got better, I even managed to come up with a 1992 Lincoln proof. This one's pretty. Any other cent collectors? 1992? Sure, it's yours. And just because you're such great people to share this wonderful experience, you're welcome. Thank you. There's always the knowledge that there's something better to collect someplace and sometime. And so, for all of you that know what it's all about, there's got to be somebody that was born in 1955 with the year of the Great Double Die. Are you really a 55 person? Well, the reason that it's important is that I have for you one of those certificate of authenticity and Lincoln cent that comes from the Cheerios package. There you are.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. Glad to share with you.